The Portland Thorns walloped the Seattle Reign for maybe the surprise result of the last NWSL weekend, but maybe we should not have been quite so surprised. Should we be talking about the Portland Thorns more as a title contender? This is this week's episode of The Late Sub. I am your host, Claire Watkins, and we're digging deep into the Portland Thorns because their results recently warrant it. We're talking highs, we're talking lows, and we're talking big picture about why it does matter to have one of these founding clubs in the NWSL on the upswing again as must-see TV. Let's dig in. So going into last weekend's NWSL rivalry games, you can go last week, watch that episode, listen to that episode. I did make the declaration that I felt like the Cascadia rivalry between Portland and Seattle didn't maybe quite have the highest heights of heat that it used to, kind of as an estimation of both Portland and Seattle's current status versus the league's upper echelon and some of those true legendary games in that rivalry's past. I said things like it seems like sometimes, that those teams' best moments feel like they're behind them rather than in the present. Other teams like Kansas City, Orlando, Washington, and Gotham have hit this new surge. Those are your top four for the last couple of years. Some changes this year, but I think front of mind for fans, making Portland in particular, again, considering some of the high heights as both a numerous time Shield and NWSL championship winner, feel a little bit more like a club a little bit further out to sea. And then all of that was promptly exploded by the game that actually happened between Portland and Seattle. And it gave me reason, I think, to look a little bit deeper specifically about the project that Portland is cultivating right now after pummeling Seattle 4-2 with a level of drama, flash, legacy, excitement that maybe I have not given them credit for unfairly so far in 2025. I might be holding on to the vestiges of 2024 a little bit too long. Now, the Thorns are always a playoff contender, despite, as we know, some inconsistency in recent years, both on the field and off the pitch. But I had maybe, metaphorically rolled my eyes a little too much at their chances, maybe in this year's postseason, despite being hung up on a couple things from the ownership staff and roster construction perspective. And I do wonder if this year still isn't necessarily the year. There is obviously this Kansas City shaped shadow over the entire league where Kansas City put the stamp on it. They are winning the Shield this year. There is a question of whether they can be beaten in the postseason. They are the best team in the league this year, hands down. But I also think this is a tight pack in the non-Kansas City area of the NWSL table. And I think I need to reset my expectations for Portland as a serious player in a possibility of getting a good playoff seed and making a deep run in the postseason. But you can understand why I felt this way, maybe. I think my expectations were managed after the end of 2024 and the beginning of 2025. They make the playoffs in 2024 comfortably. That is never a question for them. We hold Portland to a very high standard. But that season also left a lot of questions, which does create that tension about what used to be maybe the premier club of the whole league, or certainly biggest fan base, one of those gold standards of the early eras of the year. And they're trying to avoid slipping into the middle of the pack permanently. Now, why were those expectations managed? I think you can even just look at the roster and understand why there were a lot of question marks about what the team was going to look like in 2025. I mean, you even just look at the leadership structure, right? At the end of 2024, Christine Sinclair, synonymous with Portland, she's going in the Hall of Fame. She is the preeminent player of Portland's entire history thus far. She retires. USWNT national team defender Becky Sauerbrunn retires, and she was a pivotal part of that 2022 championship run for Portland. Megan Klingenberg retires. She also was a huge emotional leader for them. Very, very good for club, even after her international career ended. That's a wealth of top level experience at both the club and international level walking out the door. That is a huge changing of the guard. This is a roster that for someone like Sinclair has never dealt with an absent like this. And it goes beyond retirements too, right? Sophia Wilson is out due to pregnancy after being their obviously primary goal scorer, primary point of attack for the last couple of years. They lose Morgan Weaver and defender Nicole Payne to season-ending injuries even before the season begins. even mid-season, they lose young forward Kaya Hanks to an ACL tear. There's a lot of adversity here in terms of availability as well, both at the beginning of the 2025 season and in the middle of it. And then there are also just questions about what the growth level is going to be for manager Rob Gale, who was an interim for them mid-season. They do really well. He gets the permanent job where it doesn't seem like there's a huge coaching search. The results dip. Now they go into 2025 and you're still asking yourself, is Rob Gale the guy for a club of this stature? So a lot of question marks. But what that's turned into this season is a very competitive set of performances. Like I said, they have not excelled above that non-Kansas City pack of that really close knit group of, you have to look at Orlando, you have to look at Washington, San Diego. They're not elevating necessarily yet. Currently in 5th, only 2 points off second place. Like I said, very, very tight. They got 3rd in the CONCACAF Champions Cup, and they've got 5 wins in their last 8 matches. So Portland is in the conversation. In that conversation being every team other than Kansas City. And I want to talk about what's working. What's really impressed me, and it's going to be a little bit based on the center point of this weekend where things kind of exploded, but I've been kind of planting some seeds about what I've liked about Portland over the last couple of weeks as the NWSL has returned. Mainly, I'm very, very impressed by their midfield and their attack. As I've mentioned in the past couple of weeks, I think the center point here has to be midfielder Sam Coffey. I think she should be on everyone's midfielder of the year shortlist. She's shown up not only as a playmaker in the midfield, but also a disruptor in the midfield. And she has truly emerged as this core leader and captain that Portland has needed in the face of retirements by players like Christine Sinclair and Becky Sauerbrunn, these huge leaders on the pitch. She's that perfect kind of Portland player in that way. She's not too flashy, though she does keep scoring for Club and Country recently, which is kind of funny. Her college background is as an attacking midfielder. She can put her laces through it, but it seems like she's emerging sort of in taking those shots. She's getting more comfortable, kind of putting that into her skill set. You can tell that she feels things like team loyalties and legacy very deeply, both for the US and for Portland. She's an intellectual player. She talks about servant leadership. She wants to be that kind of captain for the team. Just a real Portland Thorns archetype. She's been there her entire professional career, just a quiet superstar for Club and Country this year, in a year where we talk probably as much about the US players that are not in the league versus US players that are. I think Coffey has been a really lovely kind of center point in growth. And I think Emma Hayes, in addition to Rob Gale, has to be really, really happy about what she's seen there. And we've seen that with some of the leadership roles she's taken on for the US. I also think young Olivia Moultrie has quietly been very good this year. She's a player that I think we all struggle to estimate exactly how young she has been growing into her role as a professional. There's been a lot of turnover, a lot of upheaval in Portland during her time as a very young player. That can't be good necessarily for a teenager's development, but she's been pretty essential to generating Thorns' attack this year in a pretty impressive way. Her assist on the team's 3rd goal on Sunday was a perfect example. She's good on the ball. She always kind of has been. She can place a pass on a dime on a good day. She's getting involved in way more attacking sequences this year than in the past, and I think that is also influenced by Jessie Fleming settling in a little bit more. I just think that Moultrie, we've yet to see it translate on the US level, certainly this year, but I think that her performances in the NWSL are consistently getting better, and I think that she also, again, is kind of adding things in the attack, adding things as a playmaker that has been very, very effective on the NWSL level. And then I think we also can't talk about positives for Portland without mentioning Hina Sagita, who might be the most consistent non-Coffey player of all on this team this year. She's a player that got jerked around kind of badly last year, was on a bench for a while. Their coach got reassigned. She started playing more because she would come off the bench. She'd be the best player in the game. Technical, understated. Teams don't have a good way to slow her down. We actually saw Seattle kind of overcorrect in sort of a midfield bypassing high line this weekend to try to stop her, try to stop Moultrie and Coffey. We're seeing teams start to scout Sagita a lot more, and that's a compliment to her game. And where they are finding ways to also bypass those sort of like counter tactics against what Hina Sagita is able to do. So I think those three have to be the trio talking about the most, but there are also young pieces in the attack that I think are really starting to click as well. We saw a lovely strike from young forward Raylan Turner, who is a player that they traded for. I think that she is another, add her to the arsenal for them of these young attackers. I would love to see her again when Sophia Wilson comes back, when Morgan Weaver comes back, see Raylan Turner involved a little bit more. I think it's taken a little bit of time for her to get her feet underneath her, but I've been very impressed. Their rookie, Pietra Torden, has also been very good. She got a goal in this game as well. I think the attack is really starting to flow. I think Torden Portland should be, if we're looking at recent results and sort of that, again, that consistency as we move into the second half of the year, she could be a rookie of the year shortlister, I think. It'll be interesting to kind of see how that continues to progress, but she's kind of a late emerging rookie of the year shortlist player for me. So there's a lot to like. And I think, again, you go back to sort of this quintessential Portland Thorns-ness that we think of, and we do think of an imposing midfield. We think of these players that are very good at disrupting and playmaking. We think of poaching. Like, that team was always good at poaching the right way, at getting wide. And I think it's really interesting that they are doing this now, again, without Wilson, who they're not really trying to replace this year because she's coming, or, you know, she's theoretically coming back. She could, we'll see what happens next year, I guess, with Sophia Wilson. But they are putting together a team that hopefully with her back, they could be able to do some pretty incredible things. However, there are still question marks for me with Portland, and I think this is the same questions as last year and some of the issues that they had getting consistent results. We've seen it actually just in the last 2 games. You see the highs, you see the lows. The defense has the ability to really get bypassed and be a huge issue for them. And I also don't necessarily think their goalkeeper situation is particularly healthy. I think you look at a tale of 2 teams, like I said, over the last 2 games, they look incredibly impressive against Seattle, but they also had this 2-1 loss against the Spirit the week before, where they were in it until the very end, famously, as we all know, but it seemed like they were getting outplayed a lot. They weren't really able to impose themselves on that game at all. They get beaten for pace sometimes. They struggle with positioning. They can't get caught in foot races because it seems like they lose. They give up space on the wide stretches a lot. I think Reina Reyes is, again, that's the really good example of a player with like this high ceiling, but maybe this low floor. She could be a killer in attacking transition. You know, she was another player who was incredible in the attack against Seattle. But in defensive transition, she can give up big opportunities at the other end. We even saw like that midfield, that kind of imposing midfield, shut off mentally in Seattle's opening goal. Seattle scored very quickly at the beginning of this game. Usually when you see those kinds of mental shutoffs, my thought goes more to the coaching staff than the players themselves. Sometimes I always wonder about what it is that you're training. What are you doing in practice? What is that mental intensity? What is the level that you are asking of your players that maybe they're struggling with that level of focus for 90 minutes? If they start slow or they fade at the end. I think we saw 2 pieces of that for Portland over the last 2 weeks. I also think the team is stuck in the goalkeeper position a little bit. Again, they've had coaching changes there. They've had, roster changes there, and they're kind of stuck right now between an underperforming international signing in Mackenzie Arnold, who has had some real rough moments so far this season, and a player still coming back from pregnancy in Bella Bixby. Both of those players have hit serious highs and serious lows. You've seen moments where they've done really well, and you've seen moments where you're like, man, they really should have done better on that. That's the kind of form volatility kind of focused in on one particular position that can really cap what a team can accomplish, especially because, as I keep saying, this is not a shield conversation. This is absolutely just a single elimination success or nothing conversation for the postseason because the shield is just about wrapped up. And those are the issues that I do think give Portland a hard ceiling versus other league competition, which is that you can be a high highs team and a low lows team and still do well in the postseason, but are you going to be able to rattle off 3 straight games? And so far, we really have not seen that. Like, I think maybe Kansas City last year is a good example. That was a team that had an incredible attack, a flashy midfield, and they could not get their act together in defense, and it killed them in the postseason. You need that. You do. I mean, for as much as the NWSL is this high transition end to end, you need defensive consistency. So that worries me a little bit. So high highs and low lows. So maybe where Portland is moving for me is a team that could absolutely be a championship finalist. Maybe they get that hot run together. They're figuring out how to score a lot of goals. All you got to do is score more goals than the other guys. And they're able to utilize what they've been cultivating in the middle and final third into this run of the championship. But they also could just bow out in the quarterfinals again. I think that we're seeing both sides. And I find that really interesting. So I think where I'm moving Portland is obviously they're going to be in the postseason. Feel very confident about that. I think they could win their quarterfinal. I think they could win their semifinal. Again, I think their ceiling could be a championship appearance. But I also think that the main positive maybe I can give them is I think they're fun again. They are interesting. They are a team that you maybe want to tune into every single week because you don't know exactly what's going to happen. And there were other teams that kind of fit that bill last year where I think you'd call them the fun teams, right? Like Bay FC, like Angel City. I think this year you could put maybe San Diego in that bucket, right? Portland moving even just from where they were last year to this next level. This is a dynamic team with a really good sense of team unity that also sometimes can shut their eyes and shut their brains off at the wrong moment. That's a fun team to watch. And so that to me is progress for Portland, because at the very least, you want, again, sort of this grand dame of the league to be a team that people want to tune into. And why does all of this matter? I mean, I think it's no secret that it's been a very weird couple of years for the Portland Thorns, even just dating back to 2021. So let's just talk like post bubble, post inaugural Challenge Cup. So just the last, 5 seasons. They win the Shield in 2021, right? Under Mark Parsons, and what they knew was his final year before he left to go to coach the Netherlands. We probably do a whole episode on just Mark Parsons' last 5 years. He's now, the sporting director at Angel City. This is the same year, obviously, that Merritt Paulson comes under fire as abuse scandals rock the NWSL. I actually did a feature on the Thorns in 2021, and I spoke to a couple of their players about sort of how the locker room was handling all of that. It seemed like that season was incredibly emotionally exhausting. They do finish as Shield winners, but they bow out early in the postseason. They ran out of gas, and I think it was understandable. They get back on their feet in a huge way in 2022. They win a championship. And it's this ascendance where you're seeing Sophia Wilson, Yasmin Ryan, Hina Sagita, Morgan Weaver all connecting. It's very cool. They have, Becky Sauerbrunn playing probably right before that decline started. She was still very good for them in 2022. It's a good team. And then suddenly, first-year head coach Rian Wilkinson resigns after the team's title win due to losing the locker room for a variety of issues, including, as we know, sort of an emotionally complicated relationship with a player. And I think, everyone goes like, okay, so they make it to the top again, and they're starting over. 2023, former assistant Mike Norris takes over. The club is actively for sale by Paulson following the backlash of the Paul Riley scandals of 2021. They're being split from the MLS counterpart. There's like a lot of questions about business-wise how all of this is going to work for a team that for a while represented this old style thought process of NWSL that it seemed like actually most NWSL teams might end up attached to MLS sides. That has not been the direction that the league has gone, which is incredibly interesting. I think, again, these past few years have been very illuminating in why it's helpful to have independent ownership. You need a mix of both. The Thorns do great. Actually, in the regular season, they finish in second place. They actually, they, as people might recall, they were maybe the front runners for the Shield, and they kind of lose their point position at the very end of the season. Wilson wins Golden Boot. Sam Coffey is the regular season assists leader. Like, they still have these really dynamic players. And there's another playoff crash out in the semifinals. This is also not entirely Portland's fault. They have changed the semifinals since then because it's hard to be the team with the bye. 2024, the team finally gets sold to the Bethal family, who is committed to keeping the team in Portland, but they themselves are not based in Portland. The great split of the Thorns and Timber structure begins. Mike Norris, who had been the head coach since the beginning of 2023, struggles mightily in the early going of the 2024 season, gets reassigned to a different role within the organization, and they promote yet another assistant, Rob Gale, as interim. He earns the permanent job mid-season. They played really well. They had this stretch last year, as people might recall, where they were playing really well. Gale is given the permanent job in the middle of the season, asking serious questions about just how wide the team's hiring process was for, again, a job that used to be one of the premier jobs in the entirety of world football. And the Thorns finished 6th and lose in the quarterfinals. It's a lot of change. It's a lot of change for these players to deal with. I mean, you go back to a player like Olivia Moultrie, and I don't know how you continue to develop with things swirling around you like that as a young player. It's too much change for a team to stay at a healthy competitive level. And it's honestly impressive that the Thorns have done a good enough job at staying, again, above the playoff line, staying in that postseason conversation while dealing with this much change. They do successfully extend Sophia Wilson, as I mentioned, but she might be available to walk at the beginning of 2026. There's a player option in 2026, so a lot of it has to do with what she decides her playing future is going to be, if she sees that in Portland or if she sees that somewhere else. RAJ, which is the sporting arm of the Bethal family, starts getting their feet wet. They've also started, they've founded the new WNBA expansion team, the Portland Fire. There's a huge facility plan, but you still kind of see the coaching hiring as very limited, and they come into 25 with pressure to keep up. It's bad for the end product. And so my hope for Portland, and this is, again, my sort of pitch for why all of this matters, we can talk about midfields and forwards and defenses and goalkeepers, and we can talk tactics and progression through a coaching staff. But what this team needs is a sense of consistency and results as well to kind of keep garnering those. This is an institution. This is one of the great institutions of the NWSL. And there was a time when every Portland Thorns game was must-see TV. But as we know, things were not great always behind the scenes at the same time. It seems like there was this old wrong idea in women's sports, in the NWSL and possibly even in the WNBA, that it was not possible to have a team be supported and treated well and given consistency and resources and not have that team get complacent. There's a long history in this league of teams having real dysfunction behind the scenes to the point of being harmful while also being some of the best teams in the league. And my hope for this new era of, yes, we're seeing it in the WNBA, but also the NWSL, which is that you can have both. And that is the dream for Portland. I think there are still going to be bumps in the road, especially again, as this RAJ Sports entity gets this whole huge ball rolling with both an NWSL team and a WNBA team. But that's an institution of the league that deserves this level of support. And they have the fans, they've got the players, and they just kind of need the rest of it. So I've been really happy to see what we've seen from Portland this year. Long may it continue. And I just recommend tuning into a game or two because what they're building is incredibly interesting, even if they are still just part of that chase pack, trying to see if they can make a late postseason run. The Late Sub is part of the Just Women Sports Network. This show is written by Claire Watkins and produced and edited by Parker Fenton. To get more of your favorite women's sports content, subscribe to the Just Women Sports newsletter and follow Just Women Sports across all your favorite channels.